This is the ID band. Hey everyone, this is going to be my Avidemux going through the basics to very advanced settings. And I'm going to use both this version and the 2.8.1 that came out. They both have different shortcut keys, but basically I'm going to have 4 sections. The first is the longest, basic editing concepts. You can use like RAW, over-the-air TV video to play on your smart TV, Android box, network storage device, or phone in its raw format without having to do any encoding. So it's like this first section is going to be one stop to where you can actually cut out commercials if you like or not and save your show without really having to know hardly anything but just how to a little few things about cutting. Section 2 is going to be advanced video or detailed settings of the codec to MP4 to start encoding if you like. Advanced filtering for Section 3 and Section 4 is going to be saving your filters for long-term projects if you want to save a show over and over again, that kind of thing. So we're using two versions of Avidemux, the 2010 and the 2022. Hopefully I'll have a fast-forward time code down here in case you want to skip and go to the more intricate advanced details of the codec and the settings, which will be later. Okay. Basically how I got this video is this is over-the-air digital channel. Everyone should cut the cord. I use the View TV AT300 if you can buy it anymore. There's probably newer ones. The AT163 is for sale. They all have USB outs to save to thumb drive or external hard drive. Powered. Don't use external that's not powered. It might ruin your external hard drive. But basically it needs to have a DVR function, save your show to those mediums. And this one saves it as .mts, the View TVs. What they are is MPEG-2 files or .ts files. Often TS is used for its transport stream, which is what is sent over the air. Sometimes DVDs will be marked TS. These MTS are, when they're recorded to your thumb drive or whatever, they're non-compressed. They're the raw image, highest quality you can get video. Like the CW26-1 for me is in 1080p. This one is in standard definition. And the first thing we need to do before we do anything is get some information. So we just load this up. It's gonna index or ask you to index, and you must do that. So it's an MPEG, that's what we want. There's the dimensions, frame rate, and the audio name, and the bit rate of what it's sampling, and frequency, basically the sample rate. Okay, so if we know it's the AC3, basically we are going to see if this is any good, your recordings. So the first thing you got to do, get the info. We know it's an AC3. We're going to, and this starts on, just like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to put what this file really is. It's an MPEG, transport stream, audio and video. That's the format that we're using. So I just put it there instead of AVI because this is not an AVI. So we know it's an AC3 audio, so choose that. And what we're going to do is we're going to save just the audio. So the name that I chose that we're working off here is this name right here. So what the index did automatically is just put a .idx. And what we're going to do is just put a .ac3. And what this does is it keeps the original name and all the files together. It's more tidy that way. So I've done this many times, and we're just going to replace the audio so it saves it. So now, this is updating, but you use your best audio editor that can open AC3 files. I know, and this is the only one I could find that I really use a lot, is this audio editor. It does have nags to it, but you got to use what you can use, and it's free. So what we're looking for here, this is pristine audio, everything. So what is a telltale sign is spikes. So what we would see, we would see like in this waveform, huge jumps in the audio that maxes out the audio, and it's like white noise or blips or squelches. Basically what has happened is if there's a storm, even wind can affect these signals. Make sure you have a strong signal, but if the signal dips, you'll get the audio just blip real quick out. Bad case, worst case scenario, these blips are really thick. That's worst case scenario, because that means probably whole shows, the audio and video have just blacked out, and this is probably no good. You might as well just delete it. But watch it. If it's acceptable to you, fine. But in most cases, this is not going to be watchable. And you might have these little blips throughout your show. And if your content is in between, then these blips won't matter. Even if there's a blip in, like one show you record, let's say this is, and there's a little blip, it might be acceptable to you. It might not. You might not even notice, or maybe think it's part of the show. So we've determined if it's a good, just by the audio. You can also kind of go over how it looks to see if there's like any pixelization or it blacks out and comes back and is all pixelized. But use your own judgment. The audio should be good enough. Okay. So we've checked that. Now we need to sync the audio. So for every show, I record this a minute before and a minute after, just so I have a little bit to play with. There is from probably 200 milliseconds. I've had shows when it starts in the morning, they don't have the transmitter turned up, so it's off like 20 seconds. But then the whole show is good once they turn up the transmitter. So, so if there is big gaps, but the big gaps are before your show starts, sometimes that'll be 20 seconds, and that's happened to me a dozen times where it's 20 seconds off. And it's hard to sync audio when it's that off, because usually if you find someone that you can, like, I can read the lips there, and basically you check mark this and start out with a negative 200. So that's 200 in the negative. So let me represent what that actually is. Let's say this is your show, and this is recorded audio. Okay. So when the show is broadcast, it has to decode. I think maybe even the iframes are, and I should get into the concepts of iframes and pframes, so I'll do that after. But for the audio, it needs to decode all those frames and then cache it so it's ready to transmit, and then the audio comes up and then it syncs with the video. So there's this section right here where it's empty and it doesn't know, it hasn't started yet, and that's how this is recorded. Now the converter box, what it does is it automatically syncs with the audio, because it knows by time code, I think, where to do it. But as it's recorded, it doesn't know, it doesn't have that code, or the program isn't able to do it. Sometimes on the newer, that's just for 2.5.6. In the newer version here, 2.8.1, I think if you were just to open up the MTS, then save it as a new name, it should adjust the audio so you don't have to do any adjustment. But check to make sure that's the case. But for this, you have to resync the audio, and it's once you get used to it, it's no big hassle. The one reason why I don't use this as much for MTS files is if there's one little thing wrong with it, this thing will be very temperamental and won't be able to work. This one's more forgiving. You can even have frames bigger than what it's supposed to be. You know, there's some kind of glitch that happened and it says it's like way bigger than it should be. This is much forgiving. It won't crash as much. So I'm going to show you how to sync the audio. So we're just going to put some arbitrary values in all these configurations. So it's going to think it's a MP4, but really it's an MPEG, and you have to do that before you save. So, so let's get back to the syncing. Basically, we would hit play.
Reverse mortgages without the hype.
So that's a little off. I have already fixed it, but basically you would just keep raising this number higher and higher until the sounds came out with the lip movement. So once you get that number, and oftentimes for certain shows, this is a magic number, either 200, 400, or 1200, and that's just how they broadcast it. So let's say this number syncs, or actually moves the audio so it's all right and everything's perfect. Now let's get back to a little bit of the concept. What it's doing here, here is the show, and since the audio was recorded here and everything's cut off, when you go into the negative, so this is the negative, this is the positive, when you go this way, what happens is it moves everything. So when you move it, we don't have this anymore. We have this. So any lag, if that's 20 seconds, there's going to be from here to here 20 seconds off. That it's going to be absolutely silent until it gets to the end of the video. So that's why record a lot before, a lot after. So once we have it synced, we are ready to save the MTS file. So we need to go to copy and the format. So this is perfect. And I'll tell you why we do this. Once we sync, we haven't made any cuts. I will go into here and save the video, and we are going to save it as, we can't right over the top of copy.ts, so I'm going to put adjusted. So basically, that takes the MTS file, makes another MTS file, except it used this value. So it is already adjusted, and what I showed you, there's a 1.2 second. That's 1,200 milliseconds. 1.2 seconds missing from that MTS file. Hopefully you don't need it, but there's a little bit missing. But we're going to use that. So we're going to open up that file we just saved, and that has all the corrected video. Since we saved another MTS file, adjusted, or you could use Shift too. We're going to load that, and that means that we don't need to do any shifting and we need to test it. Go to the lips, and it should, without having this check marked, the audio should be just fine, sync up perfectly. And now we can continue. Since the audio is all adjusted, we don't have to worry about bleed over. So at this point, we don't need to use what I just did, made the adjusted TS file. We could just use cut, save the MTS, whatever. But in doing that, basically there's going to be bleed through of the audio. So let's say here's the commercial cuts right here. So when you cut here, there will be either in this area, before or after the cut, there will be a little bit of bleed through of the commercial to your show. Now normally, that's no problem if it's 200 milliseconds. That's no problem. Just, that's just you can hardly hear it, the commercial. But if it's over a second, that might be noticeable and irritating. So that's why what I did, once I got everything synced, I'm using that other adjusted TS file, so I don't have to worry about any bleed through of commercials onto my show. So let's say we're doing that. So we don't have to worry about any bleed through. We can just do our cuts and copies. So there's a few things I need to mention first. I need to go through the concept of iframe, P-frame, and B-frames, and how this slider and how the cut works. So imagine when I move it, it's skipping through the images very fast, but think of it as individual pictures lined up. So these are made up of like iframes, which the very first frame 0 or frame 1 or frame 0 should be an iframe. It has to be. That's one of the rules. But you can have like B-frames, P-frames, and it'll eventually go back to iframes. Iframes or keyframes, keyframes and iframes are the same thing. They are pristine audio that sometimes P-frames and B-frames grab from to use. So a P-frame might use a big chunk, or a B-frame might use, like say there's a little minor changes from frame to frame, so it uses a B-frame. Just little changes, not much, so it's really small, little frame. P-frames might take a lot more than the B-frames of information. So it kind of, to be efficient about it, it kind of takes what it needs. So at some point, there needs to be another iframe, or else this gets convoluted. And also if there is if the signal, like I showed you in that waveform, let's say it cut it off, let's say the signal stopped and it interrupted this process. Within a couple frames later, you're going to have an iframe, and then that's when the picture gets all nice and starts new. So you need these iframes pretty consistently in case disruptions like that happen. So it's well thought out. So let me clear. So that's kind of what iframes and pre-frames do. And this one has to be an iframe. So I'm going to inch one frame at a time. And as you can see, all kind of the detail is down here. It tells you what kind of frame and what frame you're on, the duration, that kind of thing. Now up here, if you hit preview, that will just, it won't show any of this detail, at least from here. So make sure it's on the original. This one is the output and this is the input. So we advanced it one frame and then it tells us what frame it is here. So let's just go to our first commercial. Let's say this is the beginning of our show. Of course, here I blotted everything out, blurred everything out so I don't get a copyright strike. So let's say we recorded it early, and this is the very beginning of the intro of our show. Let me go to it right here. The up and down for this editor is the iframe, as you can see. So we'll just skip to iframes. So these are how the iframes go. You can see the interlaced. It gets these little lines are interlaced, and I'll get through that later. Get to that. So we're going to go up to find where the scene starts. Okay, I'm going to inch it so I know, okay, there's the commercial, so I inch it back and it's on an iframe. Perfect. So this is the very intro of the show or logo, whatever. So at this point, we need to cut everything out of that commercial. So we need to know the concept of this cutter. The cuts are in the form of A and B. This kind of tells you an overview of the shortcut keys. So a good concept is A takes all and B does not. And what I mean by that is, whatever you're viewing here, this is the very start of our show. I don't want to delete this frame. So A takes all. So I'm going to use B. So it'll delete everything before this iframe. So to show you, this is our picture. This is an iframe. This is what we're viewing in this window. So right here is the start of a B frame, let's say. So what this signifies is it goes from here, and everything before this is cut. Okay, so that's what we want, because I'm going to inch ahead one frame, and we don't want that. So I'm going to go back one frame. That's what we want. So this is ready to cut. If this is our first show or intro of our show. So you just go up here. You can either use Control X or cut. And that's our first cut. And as you can see, it has to be an iframe, or else it'll yell at you. Okay, that's your first one. So at this point, let's say you do a lot of cuts and you want to save your work. If you just save it how it is, it's going to crash, but you can recover from a crash. But how you kind of get away from that is just select ABC and then have it some configurations, make sure there's something selected in all these. It can just be random, and then just something random here, MP3. And then I'm going to choose MP4. Something encoded, just MP3 and advanced video codec. And now the settings don't matter. What it is going to record is your cuts. And for some reason, it won't allow the copy part and the format to be other than something like this. So we're just going to save project, and we're just going to use the same file that we're editing and just add a project at the end. And it didn't crash. Which when I started this video, I forgot that little detail and it started crashing, and then I had to stop the video and restart. So I don't want that to happen. So let's go back to where we were. Original format. So at least at that point on, we won't lose any of our cuts. So, since I only have 5 minutes, I'm going to reset the cuts. So it's back to square one. But I still have that saved if I wanted to go back. But for demonstration purposes, you just keep, basically what you're going to keep doing is just keep cutting the front, the back, and then all the commercials out. And I don't think it matters what order you do that in. So I would start with the front and maybe the back. Let's say you recorded like 3 hours and you just want to deal with the first hour. It might help just to isolate the first hour. So you take the beginning, the back, and then you would start in the middle with taking out all the middle commercials. So I went through the concept of the iframe, P frame, and B frames. I want to make sure I don't forget anything. Okay. Now, this I'm going to go right to an iframe. And it just so happens that this iframe is the very start of our commercial. So this is perfect. But you don't need to, let's say I want to get maybe just a little bit more of the commercial. Let's say our audio sync wasn't quite as perfect. Let's say I'm going a frame at a time. Here's a P frame, another I frame, a B frame. Let's say I just want to move it just a little bit. That's just a couple frames. I can do that when I use the A, because A takes all. So it will just take this B frame, number 4. So let me mark it. So it will delete the B frame 04 and everything after. And that's fine if you're starting at the A. Or it's okay to leave B frames. But what is very critical is once you cut out the commercial and then your show starts up, you have to have an iframe most of the time. So a lot of times your show will start and there won't be, it'll kind of fade in, and the first iframe, you're going to miss part of your show. Luckily, this one, the iframe is perfect. But let's say this was a B frame, and it took you a while to advance until your show was already started. Oh, you're missing something, but there's the first iframe. You can try to not use the iframe, but for a general rule, I'm going to hit the B, and for the rule, this must start as an iframe, because, as I told you, those B frames and iframes take from the previous one, the iframe before. So it has no reference when you're cutting. So that's why this most likely has to be a B frame. However, I have had success in using a small number P frame. Since these are already decoded, these are basically all decoded and they're all original quality. But don't count on that. If you want to be risky about it, I have in the past and it's fine. But if you really want to get the very first part of your show, let's say it fades, and you want to get that, even though you landed on a B frame, most likely it's better chances if you get a P frame. And just cut it from there. So I would hit the B. And even though it landed on a P frame, it still should be good. And that's only in the case of the View TVs, I think. It's already decoded. But just to be safe, you should probably go to this first. Where's the iframe? Yeah, there's the iframe right there. So since that's an iframe, I'm ready to do the B. Okay. A frame, A takes all, B does not. So what I'm viewing is on an iframe, but the B does not take all. Only the A takes all. So what you're seeing here is saved. So at this point you can cut, just like I showed you the first commercial. So this should be good. So what I do is maybe go a little bit before. Here's the show, play it, make sure it's all seamless, and it just bam, skips. You didn't even know there was a commercial there. So that's how you do it, and you just keep rinse and repeat until you get all the commercials out, and you have, from here to here, a perfect show. All your intros, however you want. I'll probably get into, like if there's, or you can also use cut or leave in like previews for next episode, and that's where that B, basically that's where that B frame comes in. The very last one can be any frame you want, because it doesn't need to watch anything more. Since these B frames and P frames take from the I frame, this can be like a B frame at the very last one can be anything. I wanted to make sure to tell you that, so you weren't leaving in anything you didn't want. So the very last, let's say that's a B frame, and that's good. So we have it all synced. We've already synced it. We're working off the video that was already synced. We don't need to do that. So we're ready to save this MTS file with all the commercials out of it, all the audio perfect, and we don't need to change any of these settings. So this is ideal. Because some of these standard definitions, once you encode it, it's only a couple hundred megabytes short of something encoded. So this is probably good enough. Standard definition, if you're just working with that. These MTS files are the original quality. You don't have to worry about something losing its quality, because that's what's going to happen when you encode. It's going to lose something. It might not be very visible, but I just thought I'd put that out there. So I've saved a lot of MTS files, and that's all I watch. What you can do is you can just put it on a thumb drive for a smart TV if it has USB, and then stream to any of your devices. I think Android devices will play it. Network storage devices off there, your phone will play MTS files. So that's what we're going to do. This is our final show. So no commercials, nothing. So we're going to say this is our final. Get rid of copy and just put final. File has been saved. And even if this was like a 40-minute show, this is so fast, it will just take seconds. And you don't need to worry about encoding, and you have the full quality one you can view anywhere. The size is the difference. So CW 1080p will be like 4 gig, and your final show will be maybe 2 gig, or 2 terabytes. I mean, I'm sorry, yeah, not 2 terabytes, but 2 gigabytes. So a normal hour show in 1080p is like 4 gig. Just kind of guessing. So the standard definition, I think, in total was 1 gig, a little over 1 gig. So the final one will be about half that size. So we've saved it. We're ready to move that and watch it. If that doesn't work, there's other videos. Sometimes it helps to put it on a thumb drive or change the name to MPEG. Some smart TVs won't take MTS. They don't know what that is. They'll only take the extension .mpeg. So that's a little tip. But otherwise, it should run. If it doesn't, and you want kind of a smaller video, that is kind of what I'm going into next with sections 2 through 4. And that's up next. Basically, I'm going to go through a PDF of all the settings, the video and audio, and the concepts of the container, the MP4, that kind of thing. Because this does not have a container. This is the raw images in some sort of format to where the images are placed one after the other with iframes and p-frames. That's basically the format. So we're ready for section 2. That is advanced video codec, and that would be up in this section right here. So you would pick, at least for this one, at the time that this was done, they were just working on X264. So that's what advanced video codec is. If you see the file name, it'll say ABC, advanced video codec. And here, basically it's X264. There's XVID, which I will get into. The MPEG-2, that's what we were working with. So if you kind of want to keep working with MPEG-2, let's say if you have like filters, you want to get rid of the deinterlace, because this is all interlaced frames. I might touch on this in later. I might tack on to the later stuff, but I want to kind of keep focused here instead of doing some of this odd stuff. Maybe just advanced video codec with X264 codec and just XVID. I'll just kind of keep it to that. So you're going to need some settings. So it already comes with some settings already set, especially since I've already kind of configured it. Here's the default. So here's the default. Now, encoding mode. This is very important. That's why it's first. It's in the general tag or tab. So there's different ways you can use this. And I have all the settings. Maybe I should go through the video or the tabs so you know kind of in the PDF I've made, and you can download off my website. I'll have the link either on the side or in the description down below. But there's several different ways. And the first way, when I first do a show, I always do video size. I download other videos and, oh, that's a good size. It has good quality. So anywhere from 300 to 500 megabytes is kind of my goal. And depending on how much quality, maybe if I'm doing 1080p, I'm wanting more 500 to a gig. So if it's 1080p, I'm going to shoot for like a gig, over a gig maybe, for a 1080p. And you'll have to work around with quality and stuff. And that's why video size will kind of let you know, okay, I need more quality. And once you do video size and set a size that it's going to almost exactly hit, it'll be pretty close. as you see it going, you will be able to see the quantizer or the quality number, and that's usually like the quantizer number, and it also uses it in rate factor, and that's the one I use. But first off, if this is a standard definition, I'm saying 250. Well, if it's an hour, maybe, or half an hour, maybe 150 if it's AVI. But basically, and it'll take a lot. It'll go through the whole video to get some stats, and then it will process. So it's kind of a long process. So I've already done this several times. So I really know a lot more of my stuff. But if you want to tinker around with what kind of size you want, because the lower the size, the less quality you're going to get. So you need to find either something that somebody else has done a size, and if you like that quality, just pick that size. But I have already, for the rate factor, I already know exactly what I want. Constant quantizer, that's easy because when you go through your video size and get a size, it will actually tell you what kind of quantizer number that it's working on. It'll jump from anywhere from maybe 5 to 7. It'll start jumping around. So I would pick 6. Okay, that's a good quantizer number. It's just an arbitrary number that they use. So if you want to encode with a constant quality, you can use a quantizer number, and you can get that pretty simple. But I like the rate factor. It's better. It's basically kind of the same thing, but in low quality scenes, you'll be able to drop further, and you can set those parameters. So you're really using the compression at its fullest. So I usually go from 18 to 22. 18 is the top quality that I want to go because the file size are going to be close to, like for an hour show for the CW 1080p, that's going to be a pretty good, like 500 meg to 300, somewhere in there. So I usually have it at maybe 19 or 20. The furthest I'd go is 22. After 22, you start maybe visually seeing that, oh, the quality isn't that great, especially when it dips in quality. Once it has another scene that's really low in quality, then it can dip. So let me go into, that's just kind of a sample. There's a lot of settings here, and I'm going to tack on another video continuing this, but I kind of wanted to give you a little look-see of how many things you have to know to really tweak your video so it looks good. So here is a little taste of all the information, and the next video I'm going to tack on is just going to be the documentation, and that's going to go through the PDF I made for all these settings. If that's all you have come to see, I want to thanks for watching the video. If you don't intend to go any further and you just want to make MTS files and keep it at that for a while, that's fine. Just know, keep those MTS files of your shows. If you really like those shows, you might come back, and it's pretty easy to encode. Just always keep those MTS files, MPEG files that you make, keep them somewhere, because it will be a snap to encode those when you're ready. Once you have the later on in this video the advanced filtering, you can load the advanced filters, and you can be encoding within seconds. So you might want to keep those episodes that you're doing in MTS. It'll be a snap to do them later on. So I encourage you to keep them. Okay, here's section 2 for the advanced video codec detailed settings for the X264 codec. That's for the MP4 container, MKV, etc. So if you want to get a copy, have it up on my website. Go to gammaphase.altervista.org. In the search, put in PDF and hit search. And we want there's one for the XVID, but there's the X264 encoding. That's what you click on. And then just click one of these pages, and it'll ask you to open or save. Okay. So once you save it, here it is. On mine, for demonstration purposes, I've highlighted some things to know. So you can do the same. Basically, the highlighted stuff is to explain kind of what to do, what not to do, the default, that kind of thing. Like here, default lowest mode that supports whatever. With a star, there's small little notes I've researched. So I've kind of marked it up a little bit. The one that you have is not marked up, so you'll just have to figure out or mark it yourself. So when we want to go and use the advanced video codec, and this is the 2010 version, 2.5.6 I like to use for MPEGs, you would load your MPEGs that are all ready to go. The previous section, you should have a whole bunch of those files, MTS files or MPEG files, ready to just open up and then do the codec thing. So when you select, you have to configure. Now this is where the PDF comes in, because there's a lot of settings here, a lot of tabs, and you can use the default and that should be fine. I'm going to go really in depth on this, and probably in depth on the 2.8.1 version of Avidemux too. It's a little different. I just use advanced configurations, and they should be close to about the same. There might be some minor changes, little minor change here. So I'm just going to use the old Avidemux, since that's my favorite to cut and navigate. So you can go through all these. Let's bring up the PDF. Now there's several modes, encoding modes, and this is one of the most important things right at the bat. So if we want to make something encoded for a certain video size, if you don't want to go over, if you have a target size set out, this is the one you'd pick. Bitrate quantizer, constant rate factor, and average bit rate. And it goes in here, video size, lower quality on complex parts of the scene, average bit rate. There's notes, high motion scenes will get a significant higher bit rate. So you pick the mode that you prefer. I prefer the constant rate factor, also known as CRF mode or constant quality mode. It'll encode the average quantizer instead of the constant one. Let me see. And then the constant bit rate, and it will explain the pros and cons a little bit of each one. And I initially used the video size because I wanted to get the quantizer number kind of, it'll show you when it's doing its work, it'll show you kind of what it's at, like what kind of quantizer number is showing up, and it's an arbitrary number that they use, I believe. So I kind of wanted an idea of the quality compared to the video size. So you have to make up your own, you have to play with it, make up your own decision. You can download similar things off the internet to see what their sizes are. Different encoders, like the X265, a very intensive compression, takes a lot longer, heats up your computer quite a lot, and but the compression is very, very good. But I'm just going to go with constant rate factor because this is all I use. Okay. You've got the PDF here, and it'll tell you what I do, the normal way I do it. But you're going to get different results with different configurations. If file size is important to you, you might want to do the video size, just to see what the quality is. How low do you want to go in video, in the video size, which translate into poor quality video. And then there's also frame size. If it's a 1080p, you're going to need, like 300 to 500 meg, or could be a gig, depending on what kind of quality you want. Let me see. So I'm going to pick video size here, and then you just put in, like, this is 700 meg, and just see where you're at. You can look at the quantizer to kind of get a feel for, okay, at 700 meg file, the quantizer is like, let's say it's at 17, kind of bounces between 17 to 18, that kind of thing. So once you get an idea I think you'll eventually want to go to the rate factor. And I've just played around. I've done thousands of encoding, whole series. So I reach from either 18 with the highest quality to 20 to 22. So in that range, I usually play around with. As you can see, higher quality, the lower the number. Follow the PDF for all the settings. I usually do the hexagon search, but you can get to really exhaustive searches, and that's just has to do with getting the best quality. So this is about the hexagon search, I think, is the default, and I put it around 8. And in the PDF, it will tell you what. Yeah, here's the gauge. Hexagon search 8. That, and then it kind of gives details on what it's doing. Refinement on I and P frames. I guess the default lowest mode is 6. But if you want an exhaustive search on all frames, you'd pick the 9 and 10. Slowest quality, slowest, but the best quality is 10. But I usually go 8. Okay, so let's go back here. Fill out what's right for you, what you believe is right by the documentation. I usually have all these check marks. It'll tell you always keep this on and different settings. Here's an interesting one, GOP size. Usually rule of thumb is you use your frame rate. So like 30 and 300. That's just kind of a rule of thumb. So if this is a 30 frame video, let me get the info. Yeah, frame rate 29.97. So I just put as a rule of thumb 30 and 300. Now the CW over the air high quality stuff is 60 frames. So if I was working with a CW 1080p, I would change this to 60 and this 600. Just as a starting off point. You can read kind of what that does. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Where is it? Where is it? I think it's in here somewhere. Here we go. Yeah. Lower than that frame rate of the video multiplied by a factor of 10 for, okay, it just kind of tells you what the standard is. I've played with this before. Sometimes I go real low with a 30. Tells you the defaults, that kind of thing. Yeah, just consult the PDF to tweak these numbers. The defaults should be pretty good. So play around. Always have the variant AQ on normal, I believe. So that's pretty much it. If you want multi-threading, this is a quad core, but auto detect is fine. So anyway, once you research using the PDF, go down, make sure all these are set, and it'll tell you why they're set the way they are, what's a good number for some of these, what to have working, some of the numbers here, and why they're set at what they're set. You know, do not change to default 60, those kind of notes I've written down. You don't want to change some of these. It might crash or give really unknown results. You know, use at your own risk. So consult that. And we should be ready to go. Once you've researched all the things you want to be set, especially if this is like a series that you're regularly going to work on. If it's a one-off, this should be fine. If you've got some shows that you are planning to do a lot of, go ahead and save as. Basically, it saves all your settings. So I have certain things like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I would just write the name of the show, what codec it is, the constant rate factor I'm using. Since it's 60 frames a second, I put in 520 and hexagon search. Kind of some of the little details that I've set, because sometimes you might want to change these. So I've got the flash, some standard definition things, And then I just got some really generic default settings, just X264, just as a starting off place, and if I want to tweak later. So that's kind of handy to have just for your encoding settings. Okay, so let's say we've got that. We need to go to the audio. A standard one I see everyone using is AAC. I think it's the best. They've determined it's the best. And the bit rate, 128, that's like CD quality. But you can go higher, of course, at the cost of file size. But it's not too bad as far as audio goes. Filters, if you have a show, I think like The Flash, it has surround sound. So that's up to you if you want to save that. I always usually, since I only have stereo and a sound bar, I only use stereo. So what that'll do is that will mix all the channels. So you might get some weird sounds, but it adds to the stereo channel. So that's what the mixer does. We don't want to fool with the frame rate or time shift or anything. Probably not the gain either, because the way they do audio is crazy. Real loud sound effects with really people talking really low. I really hate that. So we don't want to do anything with the gain. So that's the major change if you're going to change this and not have the 5-channel surround sound stuff. That's the major change if you change it to stereo. It just adds all those sounds together into a stereo signal. So it might sound a little different because if it's adding some really strange channels. But usually I haven't had any trouble with or weirdness. So I changed that to stereo. And then, of course, the container. And I haven't really gone into much of the container just by referencing it. But the part before, section 1, dealt with the raw, pure quality images, MPEG-2. Those are just images lined up, and it's not really encoded, at least what I'm working with, what's saved. But everything else is. AVIs are a container. I think everything else is MP4, MKV. So the container is just a structure to house the advanced video codec or XVID, that kind of thing, or X264. Basically, the container structure is the MP4 or MKV. MKV has a little bit different optimized structure. It's a little smaller in file size. But basically, it houses the X264 metadata or compression, and it's inside the container. So I should probably later, I'll get into FFmpeg. It can actually, and I've got batch file stuff that from my website about MP4, that you can make a batch file, drag MP4 into this batch file, and the FFmpeg will change it to MKV within a couple seconds. So you can change the container. MKV does not have a lot of metadata. I prefer MP4 because I can use a tag editor. I forget which one I use, MP3 tag editor, but I can put in copyright or artist, title of the show, metadata, and that shows up on it just keeps the information. MKV is a little sparse. You can't put as much data in there, or I haven't found much to use that with. But it's good to put on if the shows that are on the internet. That's why they use MKV, because it's really optimized to just have the video codec and no frills type of thing. But you can easily convert between MP4 and MKV without re-encoding. So I highly recommend FFmpeg. I use that all the time. If I download an MKV, within seconds I can just convert that to an MP4 really quick and then put in any metadata I want. But here I'm talking about encoding. So we're going to take the original quality MPEG-2 .mts, whatever you're calling it, .tx. They're the same thing, MPEG-2 transport streams. And we're encoding it. So like an hour show will take an hour to encode, just rule of thumb. Or 40 minutes, it'll take about 40 minutes to encode. So we touched on here, we don't need any time shift if it's all pre-cut and shifted audio. But if we just had the raw MTS file, we would have to go through sections 1 again. Okay, so that's kind of all the settings. Now there is another. Let me see. I wonder if I should talk about that now. Let me talk, since we did all the formatting in FFmpeg, that's section 2. Let's go into section 3, and that's getting into the filters. So we got the encoder, but there's some things about the filters you need to know, especially noise. Now this will help with, I should explain, when you have the raw data, the MTS, there is a lot of changes going on because it's real high quality. One thing a noise filter does is it kind of brings colors and shades up a level so they're kind of all the same, or they're nearly the same. It kind of optimizes the color range. Now when you do that, if it's set too high, like this for me is set a little too high, you have, if you look at it, like dark areas look like they're could be pixelized, and that's kind of what the anti-noise does, is it just normalizes. If there's a dark patch or different shades, it kind of makes it a little bit more of a one shade or a common shade. You don't have a lot of different shades, which gives it depth. This kind of undoes the quality a little bit. That's why I really turn I think the luminosity is the black and white and the chroma is the color. So usually I don't like a lot of pixelation through the color, and I'll turn this down to maybe 2. The color I might go to 4, maybe 3, 4, and temporal strength I might go down to 4. But play with that and see what because color you more see color than black and white. Black and white is just kind of in the background. You don't really focus in on it. So it's all right to have a high luma strength. Maybe the chroma, you don't want to normalize those colors, so maybe you might want to turn that down so it doesn't mess with the color. But maybe luma strength, maybe you don't mind some of those shades being more common. So you get a little bit more better compression the higher these numbers, at the cost of quality. Temporal strength, that's from frame to frame, so it's reaching to different frames. So I would do that, especially for the 1080p stuff, and even the let me delete this. That would be for the high quality. It says HQ denoiser, but since this is a standard definition, I should go through what I do for. I just use the MPlayer denoise 3D. I don't use the high quality since the standard definition is low already. So the same settings kind of apply. I think it's okay to just try the common settings. Unless you visually see something you don't like, then you can play with these numbers. Let's say the black and white is a little bit more pixelized. So maybe go down to 3. Try that. So just play around with that. We'll just add that. So we know this is pixelized because it's standard, or deinterlace, I'm sorry. So let me try to get something that you can actually see that's deinterlaced. Okay. So the bigger movement, you can actually see the lines. Okay, there's some lines in here, lines on the glasses. You can actually see the jagged if you look close enough. So we kind of want to get rid of that. Standard definition usually has the deinterlaced lines because that's how they were transmitted back in the day on the old boob tubes. So we would go deinterlace. And I've tried all these, and the one I really like is the library AV codec deinterlace, and I picked cubic. And I originally did this setting, and I'm going to move it at the top so it interlaces first and then applies the noise. So the reason why I picked this one was the best when I did like Lone Ranger. There was a lot of, in the intro scene, the horse was galloping, and it really didn't look really good with any of these other filters. So this is really a high volume, like a high action kind of a filter. But if you don't have that high of action on your shows, I think any other setting would be okay. but I just know the cubic interpolate is really good on really scenes that change really drastically, a lot of movement. This is great on. So I'm just going to add that, and you can play around with any of these deinterlacers. See what works for you. So I'd have the deinterlacer first. That gets the picture looking better. So we can do a preview. All that deinterlace is gone. So let's go here. Here's the input. Okay, you can see along the collar here, there's lines, and along the hands, there are lines. So let's do a preview of the output. And that's really smoothed everything up. And then when you add the denoiser, it might pixelize a little bit more, like say in this black scene, if you have the luma really set really high, there might be a little pixelation, but pick what's best for you. Okay, there's the original input. So there's a little on the filters. At one time, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was really dark. So you can actually brighten it up, and I had to do that a lot for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'd bring it up just enough so it looked just a little lighter, brighter. Let me see, I think it was MPlayer EQ, and I'd play with the brightness. But that'll affect everything, so make sure that works for you if you need it. I also did a lot of resizing on some of the 1080p stuff. I'd bring it down to like cell phone 720 by 480 or something like that. So you can just put in, and you should round it to the nearest 16th. So you can go by percentage, that kind of thing. And I think the Lands Cost 3 is the most extensive, so it'll take longer. But that's in case you want to change the original. We don't need to change the original dimensions because this is already small enough. Unless you need to change it, and I really didn't get into this much, but kind of DVD standard. If you have an odd video with weird dimensions, that setting will make it comply with DVD standards. So this might work better on like Android devices because they get kind of finicky when they want to do the 1080p stuff, but then you throw a standard definition. Sometimes on my Android boxes they won't play some of these. So I had to put like the $6 Million Man, keep them as MTS files and just put them in the USB slot and just play them like that. They wouldn't really play over a network storage device. It didn't understand the dimensions. It was too small. So whenever you redo the dimensions, of course you're recoding. So that's time and a lot of effort on the lot of heat to the CPU. And again, like in the first one, I'll reiterate the I've got an i3 here, a dual core. It's probably a little bit too slow for the 1080p if you're working on 1080p. So you need a fast computer. So I worked on the filters. There's a D logo I've used before, and in the newer version, the filter for the D logo, I think it's in sharpness. What's really neat is, okay, that's a standard D logo. I want a D logo HQ. You can load a mask. That's like say you have like the little emblem here, but you only want the letters. Basically, you take a snapshot. Avidemux can handle that, and basically blacken everything out and make the white what you want to get rid of, the logo, and load it as a mask. And you can apply some blur to it, and it will virtually, you can almost not detect it's there. So that's a real neat feature on the video filters of 2.8.1. And with MPEG, you would have to change, I forget what it is. I think it's MPEG 2. If you pick that and have the D logo, normally you'd expect a lot of encoding, but since we're using the native format, MPEG 2, it does take a couple minutes, but it uses, let's say we add this, okay, and we have a mask, okay, we would just pick copy the original format, which is mpeg.ts muxer, and the output format. So we're dealing with the same format. So if I were to just delogo everything, it doesn't take but a couple minutes, and it will just not exactly re-encode, but it kind of does. But you're using the native format, so it doesn't take as long, a couple minutes. So that might be kind of nice to play with, the original format. But that's not what we're really doing right now. We're encoding and really compressing this sucker. The MPEG-2 format is not compression. It just does the filters. It kind of changes each frame to whatever your filter told it to do. So that's why it's so quick. There's no encoding. But that's what we're doing right now, is encoding. So we had X264. There we go. Audio, pretty much the same. There's a little bit different here. I haven't really got into much. They go into extensive changing of the surround sound, even resampling here. So here it doesn't tell you that you can go to stereo, which I don't know. If you're just playing stereo, I think there should be some kind of combining of the. But this does combining of the audio from 5.1 to stereo. There should be some. Oh, here it is. Remix. I just missed it there. There we go. But a lot more detailed things you can tweak on the new version. Make sure it's MP4. And I haven't really got into the new configurations here. Move index to the beginning of the file. Optimized for streaming. So that might be better if you're streaming it over the internet or a network storage device, I assume. But no, even rotation. Huh. Interesting. I haven't really got into that. So let's go back. We've done our deinterlace, our denoise. We've got that. I don't think we want to add any more brightness or any weirdness, because that changes the whole thing. You really have to know what you're doing. Okay. That kind of does it for the section 3 of using like the filters for the video and audio. So settings for each series. Okay, this I just learned. Now, usually you have settings for your codec, and that's all I was concerned with, because there's a lot of settings here. And that really helps to have custom configurations that you can have at your fingertips to save. But when you're doing a show, and it's pretty much the same, the logo's the same, you want to save your settings and your filters. So this last section is about saving your filters. I use the same filters all the time on the same video series I'm recording. So for that, let's say we have a show, we have it ready to encode. So we're ready to encode the sucker to MP4. And before we do that, since we've got all our filters set, we've got our encoder, all these settings first, then the filters, then the audio, we want to save all our settings for filters and audio and stuff like that. So we would go save as, and we're going to use this copy TV show 5 minutes copy.ts.project. So now it's saved everything. Okay, so we were going to have to do a little surgery. All right, and this is for the 2.5.6, and I'm going to get into the new editor later. But what this does is the project file, let me find it. Here we go, is basically a JavaScript. Okay, here's what it looks like. So it's using JavaScript here. And, okay, let's just use the final product, and I do cartoons. So this is what I have set for cartoons. I've got the codec, the audio, and the audio, yeah, and all the settings, and any logos, that kind of thing. And I've cut out this section right here where it says video underneath here, between the video and the filters here. I've cut that out. So what this looks like, and I have it highlighted, this is the stuff you're going to have to surgically cut out. So you would just hit cut. And then you would save this project. You would save as you can see, a JS or JavaScript file. And then what we're going to do is, let's go ahead and save it. So save as, we're just going to, instead of project, we're just going to put a JS. Okay, it already exists. So, well, that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. I haven't cut this out yet. So, there. That's what I should have done. Then save. Okay. That's ready to go. So we go, and what you have to do is find the TV show JavaScript right here. So I'm going to hit copy. So now we find where I put the video, Avidemux, then it's the portable 32-bit here. We go to bin, Avidemux, scripts, and auto. So here is where you would hit paste. So TV show 5 minutes.ts.js. So what that does is it adds it to this menu here. So all we have to do when we first load this up, we just run the program, then we go open, and we're opening up the TS file. All we have to do is just go to auto and then pick the TV show. I'm not going to restart this and have the TV show, whatever, JS start up. So I'm just going to use cartoons. So that fits the codec, all the settings, all the filters, everything. And then all you have to do is just go and save video to MP4. That's it. So very handy to have a custom, if you're doing a series of shows. Like I'm doing cartoons now, so every day I use this, and all the settings are there. Something different in the newer version, 2.8.1, I also did the $6 Million Man, as you can see. So the section right here needs to be cut out. So let's find that. Keep the Avidemux here. So we need to go until we get to this set post procedure. So what we need to do is cut all this highlighted stuff out and save this as a PY file. And then that can also be moved. Let's open up the new Avidemux, and I think it's in here. Auto scripts. Yeah, $6 Million Man right here. So we would just place it right in here. As you can see where the $6 Million Man is. So whenever I open this up with a $6 Million Man, all I need to do is this, and it changes all the, of course I've got an error. I didn't clean out the lines right. I don't really want to take time to change it, of course, since it's already mixed with something. I think that might be the problem. But anyway, that's how it works. You just place it in there, and then it'll show up here. So when you first open up the whatever project, then you'd go to auto and then pick the named project, and everything should be filled in with all the filters and everything. As long as your masks and I have a PNG file, and make sure that will not work if that PNG file is not present. So all your files have to be exactly where you set them last time. Otherwise, you're going to get an error and have to refill in. So that's how you do the auto settings. So you can just open up original works, MPEG file, go to auto, pick this, and then encode. That's how easy it is once you get all your settings. I think I will leave it there. I've talked enough. So if you have any questions, hopefully I'll have the comments up. If not, look on the Avidemux website for more details on the editor and the settings. Hope this has helped. I don't think I'll do another video on this. I think I've gone through pretty much everything except the new controls, shortcut keys. But you can play around with that. There's a play filtered, information about the file right up here. Some other things I haven't really touched on. All the shortcut keys are here. You can also use, at first I used auto hotkey, and basically if it, like for this new version, I'm used to the old version of Avidemux. So basically all I did with auto hotkey, I think I've got a video on it. Basically if I didn't want to have one of these keys, like for, I think for the marking, I still like the brackets. But this tells you have to use the I and the O. So in auto hotkey, the bracket, I could tell it to hit or send the keystroke of I. So there's a way to get around what this new version wants you to do. Even advance, like 60 seconds, you can use the page up and page down. Just set the auto hotkey to whenever you hit the page up and page down, it actually goes to, goes forward 60 seconds. And they want control up and control down. Maybe you prefer that, maybe you don't. But I recommend auto hotkey if you want to change some of these values, because the Avidemux doesn't give you the capability of changing this yourself. So auto hotkey might be something that might help when you're switching from editor to editor. It might be confusing. So I think I'll leave it there. I hope this has helped. Have a good one. This is the ID Band.